When an avoidant genuinely has deep feelings for you, the first thing you are likely to notice is not comfort or certainty, it is inner conflict. Not because the connection lacks strength, but because it is strong enough to awaken fears they have spent years trying to keep hidden. You feel the connection. There is a sense of ease, an unexpected closeness, and a feeling that something meaningful is growing between you. Then, just as things begin to feel steady, they pull back. They become quiet. Their behavior becomes harder to understand. Many people assume that this is where everything falls apart. In reality, this is often where the deeper part of the story begins. With avoidant individuals, love rarely unfolds in a simple or predictable way. The connection tends to move back and forth. One moment they feel close, the next they seem distant. At times they are warm and engaged, and then suddenly reserved or withdrawn. Without understanding this dynamic, it is easy to mistake fear for rejection. It is easy to believe the connection is ending when it is actually moving through a challenge. One pattern appears again and again when the bond is meaningful. The connection keeps finding its way back, not in a smooth or straightforward manner, but it returns, and every return has something important to reveal. If someone repeatedly creates distance and then reconnects, do not focus only on the periods of absence. Pay attention to what happens during those separations and what changes when they come back. Some of the strongest connections do not begin with certainty. They begin with confusion, unanswered questions, and a bond that never fully disappears. Usually it starts with something neither person can easily explain. The attraction feels powerful. There is an emotional pull that seems effortless. Conversations become deeper than expected. Time spent together feels different from past experiences. Even the avoidant notices it. They may never openly admit it. They may cover it with humor, mixed signals, or periods of silence. Yet somewhere inside, they recognize that what they feel is not casual. Being around you creates a unique experience for them. They feel understood, which is both comforting and unsettling. They feel safe, yet exposed. They feel connected, yet vulnerable. This is often where the struggle begins. Deep emotional intimacy can trigger old fears long before it creates lasting peace. Often the fear is not really about you. It is about what the relationship awakens within them. The fear of needing someone too much. The fear of losing emotional control. The fear of becoming dependent and eventually getting hurt. The fear of being so invested that they can no longer avoid their own emotions. Because of this, once the relationship starts to matter, they often begin to retreat. Their communication changes, responses become slower. The consistency that once existed begins to fade. One day they seem fully present, and the next they feel miles away. This part can be incredibly painful. It feels personal. It feels confusing. It feels as though something valuable is slipping away. But the meaning behind that distance matters. Sometimes withdrawal is not evidence that their feelings were false. Sometimes it is evidence that those feelings became too intense for them to process all at once. Many people respond to this shift by chasing harder. They try to fill the silence with more messages, more effort, and more attempts to gain reassurance. They seek answers. They push for clarity. They try to hold the connection together through sheer determination. That reaction is understandable. When someone creates distance, the natural instinct is to close the gap. However, with an avoidant, that approach often creates more distance. The more pressure they feel, the more they retreat. The more urgency they sense, the more they shut down emotionally. The more they feel required to prove their feelings, the more trapped they become. Everything begins to change when your response changes. In a connection with real potential, there comes a point where you stop reacting from fear and start acting from self-respect. You stop treating every period of silence as an emergency. You stop measuring your value by their level of availability. You stop forcing closeness from someone who is struggling with intimacy. This is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about emotional maturity. You begin to understand that their withdrawal may be a protective response rather than a final decision. Instead of chasing every time they create distance, You remain centered. You stay calm. You remain grounded in yourself. That shift can transform the entire dynamic. For perhaps the first time, the avoidant experiences a connection that does not feel overwhelming. They still feel your care, but they no longer feel pressured by it. They feel your presence without feeling controlled by it. For someone who has spent years associating closeness with the loss of freedom, that experience is uncommon. Then a familiar cycle emerges. They pull away, but eventually they return. Sometimes it happens gradually, sometimes cautiously. Sometimes they come back with only a small amount of warmth at first. But they come back. This is where many people misunderstand the situation. A return alone is not proof of progress. It simply shows that the connection still exists. What truly matters is whether something changes within the pattern itself. When the relationship is moving in a healthier direction, every return brings a small sign of growth. The periods of silence become shorter, the emotional walls begin to lower more quickly, conversations become more open and genuine. Little by little, honesty starts replacing avoidance, and trust begins to grow where fear once lived. Their affection starts to feel more reliable. The fear may still be there, but it no longer pushes them as far away as before. They may continue needing periods of space, yet those periods stop looking like complete disappearances. This is where many people overlook the progress, because they are waiting for a dramatic transformation. The reality is that with an avoidant, meaningful growth often arrives in small, almost unnoticeable steps before it becomes something larger. A quicker response matters. A gentler conversation matters. A moment of vulnerability matters. An honest apology matters. A little more consistency matters. These small shifts are easy to dismiss, but they reveal far more than grand declarations ever could. Pay attention to the pattern. If every cycle leads back to the same pain, with no added honesty, no increased effort, and no deeper awareness, then the relationship is simply repeating itself. But if each return brings a little more openness, a little more emotional courage, and a little more willingness to stay connected instead of retreating, then something significant is taking place. The relationship is not merely continuing, it is growing. In many cases, that quiet growth is more meaningful than dramatic promises that never turn into action. This is also why some relationships gradually strengthen under pressure, while others collapse beneath it. As time passes, the avoidant begins learning something they once struggled to believe. They start discovering that closeness is not always a threat. Intimacy is not automatically a loss of freedom. Love does not have to mean sacrificing who they are. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this realization can be life-changing. It rarely happens because someone convinced them with words. It does not happen because another person pushed harder, explained more, or pleaded for reassurance. It happens through experience. They create distance, and nothing catastrophic happens. They ask for space, and they are not punished for it. They reconnect, and they are welcomed by steadiness rather than emotional chaos. Through repeated experiences like these, their nervous system slowly learns a lesson that logic alone could never teach. Gradually, they begin to trust that being close to someone does not erase their identity. It does not trap them. It does not force them to give up themselves. Because of that, their defenses start lowering little by little. Not through one dramatic breakthrough, not through a single emotional confession. Instead, it happens in ordinary moments. A conversation that lasts longer than usual, an answer that feels more direct, a softer expression, a decision to stay present during a difficult discussion rather than escape from it, a sign that you remain on their mind even during periods of silence, a willingness to reveal parts of themselves they normally keep hidden. This is how trust develops within this type of connection, quietly, gradually, through consistent evidence gathered over time. If you are paying attention, you will notice the difference. Their distance no longer feels as sharp as it once did. When they return, it feels more genuine. Their presence feels less protected and more authentic. These changes may seem subtle, but subtle does not mean unimportant. Often, the smallest changes reveal the deepest transformation. At the same time, something is changing within you as well. In many ways, this part matters just as much. A connection like this does not only challenge the avoidant person, it challenges you. It asks whether you can love someone deeply without abandoning yourself. It asks whether you can remain open without becoming consumed by fear. It asks whether you can care deeply without turning that care into dependency. At first, you may have hoped their choice of you would finally make you feel secure, but as the connection evolves, your perspective begins to shift. You start realizing that your emotional stability cannot depend on whether they are affectionate today or distant tomorrow. You stop measuring your worth through their availability. You stop allowing every change in their mood or energy to shake your foundation. Instead, you begin building something stronger within yourself, your own sense of stability, your own emotional balance, your own inner security. That does not mean your feelings disappear. It simply means you stop losing yourself while loving someone else. You become more grounded, more patient, less reactive, more honest about your emotions, yet less controlled by them. And that changes everything. An avoidant can only maintain genuine closeness with someone who remains connected to themselves. If you sacrifice your boundaries, your identity, or your self-respect for the relationship, eventually the connection becomes overwhelming for both people. But when you stay rooted in who you are, the relationship begins to feel different. It gains space to breathe. Fear no longer drives every interaction. Choice begins to replace survival instincts. The energy shifts from, "I need you to stay so I can feel okay," to, "I care about you deeply, but my wholeness does not depend on you." That change transforms the dynamic in ways many people never expect. This is often the point where fragile connections fall apart and stronger ones reveal their true potential. There is an important truth that many people struggle to accept. An avoidant cannot create a healthy, lasting relationship with someone who constantly tries to rescue them, repair them, or push them into emotional readiness. In the same way, you cannot build a healthy relationship with an avoidant if you take responsibility for healing fears that only they can work through. Many intense relationships fail because of this imbalance. One person becomes the constant pursuer, while the other keeps retreating. One person carries all the emotional labor, while the other withdraws under the weight of it. One partner keeps trying harder, while the other feels increasingly pressured and increasingly trapped. But when a relationship is genuinely moving towards something meaningful, that dynamic slowly begins to change. Instead of standing at opposite ends of the cycle, both people start taking steps toward each other. They begin meeting in the middle. The avoidant begins to take ownership of their behavior, not flawlessly, but in ways that are noticeable and meaningful. They become more conscious of when they are shutting down emotionally. They start being more transparent about their need for space instead of simply disappearing. They become more willing to acknowledge when fear is influencing their choices. Little by little, accountability replaces avoidance. At the same time, growth is happening on your side as well. You stop needing instant reassurance every time something feels uncertain. You stop assuming that every pause means rejection. You learn to recognize the difference between genuine intuition and anxiety-driven fear. You give space when it is needed without emotionally checking out yourself. You continue caring deeply without trying to manage or control the other person. This balance is where meaningful transformation begins. It is not dramatic. It is not the kind of thing that looks impressive from the outside, but it is real. And real love often develops in a quieter way than fantasy would have you believe. Yet despite being quieter, it is usually far stronger and more sustainable. If this resonates with you, then pay attention to what comes next, because this is often the stage that reveals whether a connection is trapped in a cycle of pain or slowly becoming safe enough to endure. Eventually, a shift occurs. Most people expect some dramatic breakthrough moment, but that is rarely how it happens. More often, it arrives almost unnoticed. One day you realize they are not creating as much distance as before. The silence that once stretched for days or weeks now passes much faster. The emotional barriers that once seemed impossible to penetrate begin showing small cracks. They start opening up without being pushed. They begin reaching out without needing a perfect excuse. Most importantly, they start choosing closeness rather than merely tolerating it. That distinction matters. Someone can tolerate closeness because the connection feels powerful, but choosing closeness means they are actively deciding to stay emotionally present, even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. It means trust is beginning to replace fear. That is when the relationship starts to feel different. Not perfect, not effortless, but undeniably different. You no longer feel as though you are carrying the entire relationship by yourself. The effort starts flowing in both directions. You notice their intention. You notice their willingness. You feel that they are not returning simply because they missed your presence, but because they are beginning to understand the value of what exists between you. And in that realization, an important truth becomes clear. The relationship survived not because it was easy, but because both people evolved enough to hold it differently. That is often the hidden purpose behind these kinds of connections. Some relationships are not designed to remain exactly as they were in the beginning. They challenge both people to grow. They reveal weaknesses, fears, and patterns that need attention. And when that growth is genuinely taking place, you will see evidence of it. Not only through words, you will see it through actions, through consistency, through emotional honesty, through a growing ability to stay connected without treating intimacy as something dangerous. So if you find yourself in a situation where an avoidant continues returning, do not focus solely on the fact that they come back. Anyone can repeat a cycle. Anyone can leave, feel lonely, and return. The deeper question is this: what is changing inside the cycle? Are they becoming more emotionally available over time, or simply becoming comfortable with inconsistency? Are their returns bringing more clarity, honesty, and responsibility, or are they bringing the same confusion over and over again? Are they learning how to communicate before withdrawing, or are they still leaving you to carry all the emotional consequences alone? And just as importantly, what is happening within you? Are you becoming more secure, more self-aware, and more grounded in your value? Or are you becoming increasingly anxious, drained, and disconnected from yourself? These questions matter because the same pattern can represent growth in one relationship and damage in another. The difference lies in what the pattern is creating within both people. If each cycle leads to deeper trust, healthier communication, stronger emotional regulation, and greater maturity, then there may be something meaningful developing beneath the surface. But if every cycle leaves you feeling smaller, more exhausted, and more accepting of behavior that consistently hurts you, then the lesson may not be patience. The lesson may be letting go. This is why intensity should never be confused with progress. Strong emotions do not automatically mean a healthy future. Powerful chemistry does not automatically create safety. Missing someone deeply does not automatically mean the relationship is becoming stronger. Pay attention to the pattern, but pay even more attention to the direction of that pattern. Direction reveals truths that emotions often hide. There is another misunderstanding that deserves attention. When an avoidant comes back, it does not necessarily mean they have completely healed. It does not mean every fear has disappeared. It does not mean the relationship will suddenly move forward without challenges. There may still be moments of withdrawal. There may still be periods of uncertainty. There may still be occasions when old habits try to reappear. The real difference is found in how those moments are handled. When growth is genuine, setbacks no longer erase the progress that has been made. Instead, they become part of the process. The avoidant may still need time alone, but they communicate it more clearly. They may still feel overwhelmed, but they stop using silence as a weapon or a shield. They may still struggle internally, but they no longer treat connection itself as something they must escape from. And you change as well. You still experience hurt at times, but you recover more quickly. You no longer spiral into fear the way you once did. You ask healthier questions. You maintain stronger boundaries. You remain compassionate without sacrificing your own emotional well-being. That is what growth looks like. Not the absence of challenges, but the ability to face those challenges in a healthier way than before. You protect your peace while still being clear about what you require. That is what real emotional maturity looks like. Not perfection, not constant harmony, but two people slowly learning not to let fear run the entire relationship. This kind of progress is meaningful because it is earned through real situations, not imagined ideals. It comes from pressure, effort, and actual lived experience. So if you are in something like this, pay attention closely. Sometimes the clearest sign of love is not the absence of fear, but the fact that fear shows up, and both people still choose growth instead of letting it take control. You also have to recognize something important here. Patience is not the same as self-betrayal. This is where many people get confused and end up hurting themselves. Being patient with an avoidant does not mean dropping all standards. It does not mean accepting minimal effort and calling it deep love. It does not mean waiting endlessly while receiving just enough attention to stay emotionally hooked. Healthy patience has structure. It has awareness. It has boundaries. It sounds like, I understand your fear, but honesty still matters. I can give space, but I will not beg for basic respect. I know healing takes time, but time alone is meaningless without effort. A lot of emotionally strong people lose their balance here. They confuse compassion with unlimited tolerance. They confuse understanding someone with abandoning themselves. They keep excusing the pattern by saying, maybe more time is needed, even when nothing is actually improving. That is not growth. Do not stay stuck in that. If the connection is genuinely evolving, there will be signs. Even small ones count. More honesty, more accountability, more consistency, more emotional courage than before. It may be slow, but slow progress still moves. It still deepens. It still shows direction. Slow is not the same as stagnant. One is movement, the other is repetition. So stay kind, but stay aware. Stay open, but stay grounded. Love should expand you, not erase you. And if this is hitting something inside you, keep listening, because this next part often brings clarity. Sometimes these relationships feel so intense because they force both people into growth they never consciously chose, but deeply needed. The avoidant is pushed to face closeness instead of constantly escaping it. They are forced to confront the walls they built and the fear they disguised as independence. At the same time, you are pushed to face your own patterns, your need for reassurance, your fear of abandonment, your urge to chase certainty from someone who cannot always give it. In that way, the relationship becomes a mirror rather than just a romance. It reflects the parts of both people that are still unresolved. That is why it feels so powerful. It activates emotional patterns that easier relationships often never touch. But growth alone is not a reason to stay forever. Pain does not automatically make something meaningful. A connection only becomes truly valuable when that growth leads somewhere healthier, with more stability, more honesty, more mutual responsibility. If both people are evolving, the relationship strengthens. If only one person is growing while the other remains stuck in avoidance, then the lesson may be personal rather than relational. The connection may still change you, even if it does not become permanent. That distinction is crucial. Just because something transforms you does not mean it is meant to last forever. What matters is direction. Is it moving both of you closer in a real, grounded way? When it is real and developing healthily, the energy begins to shift. It feels less chaotic, less confusing, less like emotional survival. The depth is still there, the attraction is still there, but there is also more peace underneath it. You stop overanalyzing silence. They stop feeling trapped by emotion. There is more trust in distance, more ease in closeness, more stability in the bond. It is still imperfect, still human, but no longer driven by panic. That is the shift many people are waiting for without knowing it. The relationship starts to feel less like survival and more like choice. They choose to communicate. You choose not to assume the worst. They choose to return with honesty. You choose to respond without losing yourself. Over time, these choices build something stronger than intensity alone ever could. Not because it never struggled, but because it learned how to survive struggle without collapsing. That is rare. And that is what makes this kind of connection different when it matures properly. It is not built on chemistry alone. It is built on growth, patience, emotional responsibility, and two people slowly learning how not to let fear write every part of their story. So if you are trying to understand what this connection means, do not focus only on how strong it feels in the moment. Because sometimes the strongest connections are not the ones that begin perfectly, but the ones that learn how to become real through distance, confusion, and the gradual decision from both people to meet halfway, instead of demanding that only one person changes.